What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scales 13. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you what it's like to own a leopard gecko. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Wow, Scales, another leopard gecko video? Come on, man, you've done so many of those in the past already. But hear me out, guys. How am I gonna make a what it's like video talking about how awesome it is to keep reptiles without including the awesome leopard gecko, right? Leopard macularis. Well, the reason leopard geckos are so popular, and I know some people think that they're so boring in the reptile community because you can find them at every store, everybody has them, blah, 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 but they're a lot of fun, and these animals are relatively easy to care for when you've done your research properly. They're amazing. I love leopard geckos. My first leopard gecko I've had for 9 years. That's my oldest leopard gecko. And my younger one, the one who's named Tiny Tim, I've had him for about 7 years. Now, of course, our first subject, whenever we're talking about what it's like to own one of these reptiles, is when is the animal going to be the most active? Now, as far as I know right now, leopard geckos are a crepuscular species. Now, there's some new research going on where the new information is that these animals wake up during random times whenever the opportunity arises. And I definitely can see the merit behind that because, of course, what was stated previously and was well-known knowledge in the reptile community is that leopard geckos were a nocturnal species. And I do see my leopard geckos crawling around at night when their lights are off at around 3 a.m. around their enclosures, but I do see them active in the morning and I do see them active during dusk, right? So the information stating that these animals wake up during random times whenever the opportunity arises, I forgot the term for it, but that information could possibly be true because if the animal is most active at dusk and dawn, but you see it awake for a long period in the dead of night, that could suggest that the animal's not a crepuscular species. But for now, I'm going to stick to what I know, and I'm just going to say these animals are crepuscular. So what does that mean? That means that these animals are going to be active during early morning and evening. So if you're a person who works during the day, where let's just say you work a 9 to 5, your best time you're going to have to interact with your leopard gecko when it's awake, looking for food, exploring its enclosure, are going to be your early mornings and your evenings. And honestly, that's what works for me. When I get home, I see my leopard geckos crawling around looking for food, and I see them doing the same thing when I wake up in the morning. There's even times where if I'm awake at night, I can look in the animal's enclosure and I can see that the animal is still being active and walking around. So if you're gonna get a leopard gecko, I just want you to understand that this animal is not one of the creatures that's going to be awake at 12 p.m. in the middle of the day. I've never seen my leopard geckos awake around 12 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Usually they're in one of their hides, sleeping, and they wake up after the sun starts to set. So the second subject that we always bring up in our What It's Like series is whether or not these reptiles are easy to handle, right? Here's the awesome thing about leopard geckos. Because it's not a big, strong, powerful reptile, it can't hurt you, let's say, like a large monitor lizard that isn't used to people or isn't being properly handled or things like that. They do have teeth, they have small teeth, but they're sharp, and if the animal bites you, it can draw blood. But what I want you guys to understand about leopard geckos is they are a 100% captive bred reptile, especially in the US. And most individuals you find are going to be very docile. Now, of course, with handling, you want to have supervision with small children. Honestly, there's a very low chance of a leopard gecko harming you, but there's a high chance of you harming the leopard gecko. Now, the good thing is leopard geckos tend not to move too fast. They're not super quick, let's say something like a swift or an anole or one of those smaller, flightier lizards, but these animals can drop their tail, and since they're smaller, they can become injured if, let's say, a small child is playing roughly with the reptile. So as far as handling leopard geckos goes, if you have an animal that is used to you handling it and has gained trust with you where it's not afraid of you, it's not defensive, then they're going to be very easy to handle. Just keep in mind, it's a small reptile, they are delicate, so take your time, be patient when it comes to building that trust, and just make sure that you are handling the animal lightly. All right, guys, so the third subject that we want to talk about what it's like to own a leopard gecko is how difficult is the maintenance on this species. The awesome thing about leopard geckos is they can thrive in a variety of enclosure setups. You can go with the minimalist, you can go with the naturalistic, you can go with the bioactive. Me personally, bioactive is my favorite way to keep reptiles, and that's what I use for both of my leopard geckos. If you look at Gek, they are both in bioactive setups with enough deep substrate in there where there's enough moisture at the bottom for the cleanup crew to survive, but still clean up any of my animals' waste on the surface of the enclosure after the lights go out, when they can crawl up to the surface. These animals are doing great in these enclosures. I actually have a live plant growing in each one of the enclosures. Both of them are jungle cactus and they're doing quite well, but you don't need to go bioactive for a leopard gecko to live in an environment where it is thriving. You can also just go with a regular naturalistic setup. You can go with a minimal setup. Hey, let's look at the basics when it comes to taking care of a leopard gecko. Now keep in mind this video is not a care guide, but what does it need? Water, variety of insects, just with calcium of course, a vitamin supplement at least twice a month, and make sure that the animal has at least 3 hides. Cool hide, warm hide, and a humid hide. You do those basic things and your leopard gecko is going to live a very long and healthy life. One thing that I would stay away from when it comes to substrates are using plain sand without anything mixed in the animal's enclosure. What I do for my leopard geckos is, since they're on a bioactive substrate, they do have sand within their substrate, but it's mixed into the lower layers of the substrate, where the top of the substrate is a mixture of topsoil and cocoa fiber, and that's it. And the reason I do that is because the finer stuff at the bottom is going to be the area where the moisture is going to leak down towards when I pour water in the enclosure, to make sure that there's moisture below the surface for the cleanup crew, and to make sure the enclosure isn't too dry for the plants that are growing in there as well, and also aid the leopard geckos in shedding when it's time for them to shed their skin, and give them a little extra moisture to make their sheds more successful and easier on the animals. Now when it comes to the size of the enclosure, you can go with something as simple as a 20-gallon long fish tank, or something similar to the same footprint as the minimal of what you need for your leopard gecko's enclosure. But you can go much bigger. A new standard that seems to be brought into practice nowadays is to keep leopard geckos in something that is about the same size as a 40 breeder, which is about a 3-foot long enclosure as a minimum. And I've even seen people keep leopard geckos in enclosures as big as a 4x2x2, like what I have my Aki in. If you want to do that, that's awesome. It's great to give this animal a larger space, because if you give the animal a larger space, the animal's not going to get bored as easily. The animal's going to have a larger area to climb and explore. The awesome thing is you'll be able to add more hiding spots, where instead of adding 3 basic hides, you can even add 6, maybe 8 hides to an enclosure like that. And as the enclosure is longer, you're going to have a much better thermal gradient, where the animal's going to have a array of different areas and different temperatures that it can regulate its body temperature on, rather than the hot side and the cold side being close together, where the animal doesn't have many options to make itself comfortable and heat up its body or cool it down correctly. Now when it comes to heating a leopard gecko, let's keep this in mind, guys. Even though this is not a care guide, these guys don't require a ton of heat in order to survive. My Aki monitor, of course, needs upwards of 140 degrees Fahrenheit in this basking spot to be able to heat up his body efficiently and to be able to thrive. For a leopard gecko, the temperatures, they don't have to be so extreme. Your hotspot only needs to be about 90 degrees for your leopard gecko, where your cool side can dip down to the low 70s, which is perfectly fine. But the warm side of the enclosure can also be around 80, 85 degrees without being a problem at all. It's very simple, very easy. You can use CHEs, you can use deep heat projectors, you can even put a little hide there where if the animal doesn't want to bask underneath the light during the daytime, it can easily lay under a hide where it's dark, but still get a good portion of heat to keep its body warm. Alright guys, well I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've made it this far and you want to hear another what it's like video, let's say about my blue-tongued skink, Panther over here, please leave a comment in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope everybody is enjoying the content and watching the channel grow. Everyone have a great day. Peace.